Hey everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And our guest today is Justin Mardjuki. He's CEO at Sayvant. Welcome, Justin.
Thanks, John. Good to be here today.
Yeah, excited to have you in our ongoing series of AI medical scribe, ambient clinical voice companies. It's so interesting to see how companies come together and how they're addressing this problem. But before we go there, tell us a little bit about yourself and Savant.
Great. Yeah, my background's in health tech. I've been in this space for the last 10 years. Started a company called LifeLink Systems prior to Savant, which was one of the early pioneers in using NLP and large language models to automate non-clinical patient-facing tasks. And built that company up to work with six of the top 20 pharma companies and many of the large systems across the US. And we're doing about 10 million patient conversations a year. So kind of an
Wow.
awesome scale to be looking at. And as I was thinking through what problem to tackle next, I knew I wanted to stay in healthcare. I knew that large language models were finally delivering on the promise that we all thought NLP was going to unlock back in 2015. And it felt like this space was just one where there's a huge ability to impact physician experience, patient experience, and all of the downstream constituents of healthcare as well. So that's, my transition from the patient-facing side of the world over to the provider-facing side of the world.
Interesting. It's quite the change. So tell me this a bit of the story behind Savant. Obviously sounds like that was the move into the provider side. You want to stay in healthcare, but what do you see as kind of the opportunity in a space that has so many players?
Yeah, so Savant was really born out of the observation that acute care providers in particular were very underserved by the existing players in the market, right? Acute care comes with a whole host of challenges that you might not see in other specialties where, the variety of visits that you're seeing, right? The reliance on the medical decision making to document the complexity of the patient for billing, right? The speed and flow of patients, all of that is so much more challenging. And we were seeing that other solutions in the market were breaking down in settings like emergency rooms and urgent
Mm,
cares. So, when we were looking at this problem, we were co-designing and developing with Inflect, which is Vituity's venture studio, and they had
right.
seen dozens of these solutions, but they'd seen that the utilization in acute care settings was challenging, right? You would get less than 5%, sometimes less than 3% or 2% of clinicians actually adopting these solutions. If you want to get to those impacts of physician burnout, patient experience, and all the revenue cycle impact, right? You need to get that utilization up. So, we
Yep.
felt like that was the opportunity to tackle. And, if we can do it in a way that it really felt that it was built by clinicians for clinicians, we can address that need in the market.
Interesting. So tell me, how does this solution compare to so many other players in the market? I can make the long list. I tell people now just go to healthcareittoday.com and click on ambient clinical voice companies in the sidebar. You'll see a bunch of them. But, what do you see as kind of the main benefits of Savant and, how it compares to the others in the market?
Yeah. So I think the first, which we've covered, right, is that we're laser focused on acute care workflow and really understanding all of the edges and pain points that you have to solve for that specific cohort of clinicians. I think the second is that there's a lot of solutions that are really focused on the first layer of better transcription and better transcribing, right?
Uh-huh.
So these are AI scribes and ambient listening, which can get you to a better transcript. But what we're really focused on is the next step, which is once you have a transcript of what happened in that encounter, how do you actually translate the clinician's thoughts into a robust, clinically defensible chart, right? And the analogy that I think has resonated for a lot of folks is we're all drivers, and if you
Hmm.
stop at a red light and you look over your left shoulder before turning right, and someone would ask, well, why did you do that? You say, well, that's how I learned how to drive, right? And a lot of what happens in acute care documentation is asking providers to explain their thinking at a painful level of detail when they had already come to that judgment, as they were evaluating the patient's labs and imaging. So we're really focused on that second level of documentation automation, and that doesn't have a one-to-one relationship with what maybe was said to the patient or what a clinician might want to dictate, verbatim into the EMR. So, I'd say that's the second pillar. And the
Right.
third is really, you're seeing a lot of discussion in the industry today about physician burnout and patient experience and the impact that these ambient listening solutions can have um, on those pain points. Those are important, don't get me wrong, but we think that the real unlock in care is how do you actually improve charge capture accuracy,
Mm.
right? And how do you decrease medical malpractice risk by having more defensible, clinically validated charts as opposed to, a speech to text one-to-one relationship, which everybody can, build today on top of one of the foundation models.
Interesting. Well, it adds a nice ROI component when you figure out the charge capture as well. So, a lot of people are like, how are we going to pay for these scribes? And I think that's one of those elements that's definitely being added by a lot of companies. That's interesting. So walk us through the workflow. What does it look like for a clinician? What are you using certain devices, the desktops, what's the workflow flow look like for a clinician with Savant?
Yeah, so Savant supports a lot of different clinician workflows, right? Some folks have gone all the way to the ambient listening world where they walk into the patient's room with Savant on their phone, they have a whole conversation with that patient, and even the medical decision making, right? Once the labs and imaging are back, they can come back into the room and actually discuss those results with the patient. So some doctors are doing 100% ambient now, which is very fascinating from a patient experience standpoint, right? And when they go back to their computer, that note is ready to go, right? We generate 99% of notes in 60 seconds or less. So, we have a cohort of clinicians that really have jumped 2 feet first into ambient listening, and others that still use a mix of ambient listening and dictation into the phone to ultimately get to that final chart. But that ability to focus on patient care, be able to transcribe the encounter in 30 plus languages and dialects, right? That just decreases so much of the cognitive lift from clinicians that are working long emergency room shifts.
Yeah, I'm interested in that workflow because you're right. The doctor goes in, sees the patient, then waits for the lab results, goes in again with the lab results to then discuss, what they found. So, does Savant allow for that workflow, where it's kind of multiple ambient sessions, if you will?
Yeah, exactly. We actually see emergency docs run several patients in parallel with Savant, right? That's a pretty unique constraint. And for each patient, they might actually append three, four, or five separate ambient listening or dictation audio capture into that one patient encounter, right? Because all the labs might be returned at different speeds. And when you go to dispo a patient, right, that might be the last time you touch this patient. So the Savant chart is evolving under the surface as you add additional information to it. We see doctors run, in the emergency room if it's busy, five, six, seven, eight patients all at the same time.
Sure. Yeah, we see that in the PT world as well. It's kind of a similar
Mhm.
workflow where it's an ongoing encounter that with multiple, patients at the same time. That's fascinating. And are most people using the mobile device? Are they using a tablet? Are they using the desktop? Does it support all of those, or talk about what devices are available and what you see them using?
Yeah, all devices are supported. We've seen predominantly um, phone is a preferred modality for walking into the patient room and capturing that information, and then going back to the desktop, right, to review that note and make any final edits before pushing it to the EMR.
Interesting. And this question's becoming a little dated, but talk to us about, how much of this is automated with technology? Are there humans in the background? Obviously, there's the human in the room, the clinician, but how are you approaching the automation versus human discussion?
Yeah, so the chart generation itself is 100% automated, right? There's no way that if you had a human in the loop, you could generate the chart at a speed that meets the rapid pace of what's happening in an emergency room. But on the back end, what we're doing is building out human-based evaluations based on quality and alignment with revenue cycle needs, right? So, you have an automated system, but you have both automated and human checks on that system so you can understand, did this set of notes generated today pass the needs of this customer's quality team, right? And for them, that's awesome because instead of going through a change management process with hundreds of clinicians, you can now look quantitatively and understand that alignment.
Interesting. Let's talk about the EHR integration. How is this integrated with the EHR? Are you working with all the EHRs? Have you started with a couple? How are you approaching EHR integration?
Yeah, we're starting, with the EMRs that I think have the largest footprint in the acute world. So Epic and Athena and Cerner and eClinicalWorks, right, are the ones to start with. And, I think having been in this space for a long time, I think everybody gets excited about integration, but when rubber hits the road, when it comes to prioritization on the IT roadmap, right, that's a different question. So, the way we've been working with our partners is Savant still saves clinicians 10 plus minutes per chart, even unintegrated, right? And you still see that uplift in charge capture as a result as well. And if
Interesting.
sites get to a level of utilization of Savant that they can go back to their IT team and say, here's our usage of this platform, and here's a very fast, non-invasive integration that we can get going, whether it's Epic or Athena, right? It's a Fire-based integration. That's a much more compelling argument to make to the IT administration than, hey, we're launching a pilot and we'd love to get this on the roadmap, right? So if we've prioritized everything about how we've built Savant and how we integrate to really make that as painless as possible for the system.
Interesting. And talk to us about the clinician. Does the clinician have to change the way that they're talking in the exam room? I mean, obviously, I don't think Savant can see what they're thinking or what they're seeing yet. Maybe one day some of those things will be. So obviously, they have to voice it. We know that. Are there other things that you suggest to clinicians? And talk maybe a little bit about the onboarding process too. How do you train them, or how do you approach kind of onboarding of clinicians and the things they need to change to make the most of their use of Savant?
Yeah, one of the most important things for us is really understanding what the current state is at a site, right? So certain sites still have one-to-one human scribe coverage, so that's increasingly rare. Others have shared scribe services. Others have moved fully to just drag in dictation, right? So first understanding what are you using today? How do you feel like you are making, the most efficient charts today, right? And then mapping out actually a very specific onboarding plan for that site or for those clinicians based on what we already know. So, just to give you one fast example, right? If you can put in a custom note template that aligns with how the site and Savant have agreed to generate an emergency room chart, that saves every clinician 2 clicks on the way in, right? And that adds up over the course of a busy day where you're seeing 120, 130 patients a day. So from an onboarding perspective, there's certainly, like any new technology, there's a learning curve. We feel like most clinicians get that aha light bulb moment somewhere between 1 and 3 shifts in. And,
Mm.
I think one of the biggest magic moments of Savant is when, you're generating your medical decision making. And a lot of the solutions today, they don't support a robust defense of your actions, right? You're dictating in your medical decision making. But with Savant, clinicians are telling, this is what I chose to do with the patient. This is why I decided to dispo them to home. And Savant is able to generate a robust MDM and a robust differential diagnosis, even if it wasn't fully verbalized by the clinician. Of course, it's on the clinician to review all of it still, but that gets to that magic moment where, we're helping them explain their thinking and they didn't have to verbalize every thought that they had.
That's interesting. I think it's interesting that you kind of compare too, like, are they using templates? Are they using a scribe, a shared scribe, automate, dictation? Like, how does that play out when they have a full-time scribe with themselves or even a shared scribe? Are
Yeah.
they, is the scribe using Savant, or are they, obviously I think most of us look at it and say, well, the days of scribes is numbered unless you need like a chaperone or things like that, right? Then maybe it
Yeah.
makes sense. But yeah, how does that evolve when they already have a scribe and they're probably afraid to just fire the scribe because they want, to see how it goes. Is the scribe
Yeah.
using it, or how do you see that playing out?
So scribes don't have access to Savant today. The providers do, and I
Okay.
think scribes are immensely helpful to providers in ways outside of documentation, right? Whether
Yeah.
that's running labs or printing out discharge instructions. And we've seen at a lot of sites, first of all, I think the days of one-to-one scribe coverage around the clock are over, and
Yeah.
sites that still have scribes are pivoting them more to, care coordination type
Yeah,
tasks,
medical
right?
assistant type stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And so we've actually been able to measure with a few sites that have gone live with Savant where, the utilization is high. What does it look like when you've pivoted your entire Scribe workforce to care coordination instead of documentation? And you can have your cake and eat it too from a cost perspective, right? Because
Mm.
obviously Savant is lower cost than a human scribe. So you're able to see Savant's generating that improvement in RCM outcomes, decrease in med mal, like we spoke about, but you're also seeing an increase in patient experience scores because the scribes are getting more face-to-face time with the patients and, guiding them through that emergency encounter in a way that's much smoother. So I think, we're going to see certain sites where that's the pattern, and others that maybe have been considering fully eliminating their scribe programs over the next 3 to 12 months, and they have more confidence in accelerating that decision, right? If Savant is able to solve that documentation burden on behalf of the clinicians.
Interesting. Let's talk about accuracy. How accurate is the solution? How do you kind of evaluate accuracy? I think it's fascinating how each company kind of evaluates accuracy in a different way. How are you approaching accuracy?
Yeah. So we're doing enough scale now that it makes sense to build in quantitative measures of accuracy. Of course, when you're designing the solution and building it out, even on a site to site basis, you want to be reviewing a sample of charts, a subset of charts each day to make sure they're aligned. But, you know, there's been over 15,000 emergency room shifts completed with Savant to date, and we've launched just this year. So the growth has been tremendous. We're processing about 2 billion LLM tokens a month, which is just a staggering number to me.
Yeah.
And what we think about from an accuracy perspective is two things. The first is, what is the feedback that we're getting from clinicians on the ground who are that human in the loop for this process, right? And today, less than 10% of all Savant charts receive any kind of edit from the clinician, and those are typically tone or copy editing changes, right? And 0.2 to 0.3% of charts, get a active clinician thumbs down, which then triggers a human quality review of those charts and,
Okay.
additional fail safes for future. So, I think, our goal has been focusing on accuracy of that output in a way that a clinician does feel like that is a clinically defensible and accurate chart, as opposed to where I feel like a lot of companies have really focused, which is purely on transcription accuracy and word error rate, right? We think those are important as well, but those are top of funnel metrics. And ultimately, we think the bottom of funnel conversion and RCM's ability to code that chart is really what matters.
Hmm. Fascinating. And let's talk about specialties. Obviously, you described already you're focused on acute care, urgent care, emergency rooms. Does it work for other specialties? Are you looking at ambulatory? Do you think you'll expand that way? Or do you think you'll expand within acute care to more of the nurse side? Any idea on supporting other specialties and kind of where you're headed, or you just heads down urgent care and emergency room, not thinking about anything else?
No, we're actively considering our roadmap beyond emergency, of course. We're live in emergency and urgent cares today. We feel like there's a tremendous footprint of those encounters that are so underserved by the market today. I mean, there's 300 million plus urgent care and emergency encounters a year in the US, right? So from a market addressable market perspective, we feel like you can build an awesome company just in emergency care and urgent care. But
Mhm.
we also have our sights set right on additional um, stanchions within acute care, whether that's hospice medicine, wound care, expanding into nursing documentation, and then eventually into general medicine and beyond. But we want to be very, I think, thoughtful and methodical about being able to shapeshift Savant, so to speak, to each specialty's needs. And that goes far beyond, a simple note template, right? I think everything from the quality measures, the ability to measure accuracy, the workflow, all of that is different. And so we feel like that is Savant's edge in the market, right? We can go into a acute care medical director's office and we speak their language, right? And Savant has controls for, hey, does your site allow for interpretation of ultrasound or not? And that impacts everything from the procedure statements to the final MDM defense. So it's certainly on the roadmap. I think we recently announced our partnership, our enterprise partnership with Vituity, and they've been an awesome design partner, right, to vet each of these specialties as we put them online.
Very interesting. So I think people are going to ask, where can they go to learn more? Where can they get a demo? So, where should people go to learn more about Savant?
Hey, you can visit us at savant.com and reach out to us, and someone will respond within the hour. And we're very excited to get folks demoed on Savant and get you to that aha moment of why Savant in such a crowded market. So please reach out and we'd be excited to talk to you.
Awesome. So that's Sayvant, Sayvant.com. Awesome. Thanks so much, Justin. Appreciate you talking with us. We can't wait to see, like I tell people, 6 months from now, a year from now, we'll have an entire other conversation because it's moving so quickly. But appreciate you sharing where you're at today and how you can help healthcare organizations. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcast application. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.